From teacher shortages to fights over curriculum, vaccines, and a new headline that says that because of the pandemic, 2 decades of progress in math and reading has been erased. What is going on in our nation's public institutions of learning as millions of kids head back to school today? We are taking you inside the nation's schools with our special school edition, all coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Today we are talking about teacher shortages. You can't pick up the newspaper or turn on the TV and not hear about the shortage of teachers in this country. Over 280,000 public school teachers are needed to fill our classrooms. Florida, which is one of those states that is struggling to hire teachers, has what some call an innovative and some call a not too smart plan. Governor Ron DeSantis, his regressive influence on the state's education system is arguably a prime factor in why Florida is struggling to hire teachers. But rather than look inward and change his policies, Governor DeSantis is pushing a dubious quick fix, hiring military veterans without degrees, without teaching degrees or teaching credentials. Under this plan, Florida will give veterans 5 years temporary teaching certificates while they finish their bachelor's degrees. Now, teachers' unions across the state have come out against the policy, saying hiring unqualified teachers would be harmful to students. Now, on its face, a teacher having served in the military isn't necessarily a bad thing. But what makes this plan grim is that DeSantis sees the policy as part of his effort to inject nationalistic propaganda into Florida schools. In a Twitter video discussing the policy, he targets union bosses for insisting that teachers get certain credentials. DeSantis goes so far as to say that because veterans fought to protect our freedoms and kids stand up every morning and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, that somehow it's a good thing for kids to see veterans in the classroom. Today I'm asking a union boss and a school superintendent what they think about hiring veterans who don't have teachers' credentials to teach public schools. My first guest is Andrew Spar. He's the president of the Florida Education Association, one of the largest association of public school employees in the state of Florida. He's a frequent guest on the show, and good to see you this morning, Andrew.
Good seeing you as well, Areva. Thanks for having me.
All right, some big headlines coming out of Florida. Governor DeSantis, who has lots of things that he gets involved in when it comes to schools. I don't know, maybe rather than being a lawyer and a politician, he should have been a teacher because he sure has lots of opinions about how schools should be run. And this latest, veterans, we love them. Everybody loves veterans. They've served our country. They're amazing people. They should be taken care of. But in the classroom, and by the way, you're one of those union bosses, I'm sorry.
Yeah, listen, I'll wear it proudly because I represent people who care about kids. And anytime I get a chance to go out and talk about public education and the great work that our teachers and staff do, I'm going to do it. And look, we have a lot of veterans who work in our public schools right now, side by side. They've gone through the standard processes and protocols to become teachers, and great teachers at that. The idea here is, do we reduce standards for what we expect out of people coming into the teaching profession? And will that benefit kids? And actually, I want to go one step further. Does it benefit the teacher themselves? Because in a lot of cases, we may be setting people up for failure. Teaching is hard. There's actually a superintendent in Panama City, Florida, up in the Panhandle, who recently was asked by the State Board of Education why 10 teachers in his district quit in less than a week of the start of the school year. And he said, well, because none of them had the background in education. They didn't have the credentials in education, and they all quit. Now, these weren't military vets, but these were people who had other degrees, never taught in the classroom. Teaching is hard. That's what he said. And it is. For anyone who's a teacher, they know teaching is hard. And even fully trained, fully credentialed teachers who come into the classroom, their first few years are very challenging, very difficult. And it's why we have a high percentage of folks who don't even make it to 5 years in the teaching profession. If you reduce that even more and take away those basic skills and learnings, then I'm worried you'll have a much higher rate of people who don't succeed in the teaching profession.
Yeah, I guess what bothers me, Andrew, when I think about Florida, I'm thinking about banning books. I'm thinking about, don't say gay. I'm thinking about, taking anything that has to do with race or teaching about the honest and accurate history of America and its, tarnished racial past, efforts to scrub that out of school districts. And now the response, rather than look at those policies and how those policies might be impacting teachers, let's bring in, veterans. And I hate to even talk about it in this way because it looks like we're, slamming our vets, and we're not. But I'm just talking about, why doesn't this governor look at what he has done to make it more difficult for teachers in the state of Florida, and how that could, if you change some of those policies, maybe he could attract educated, certificated, teachers with the kind of experience that we want in our classrooms.
Yeah, look, we have some ideas on what we should be doing to get teachers into the classroom. One, the teacher shortage, as it's called, is also a shortage of people willing to come into the profession, stay in the profession, and be treated the way they're being treated and paid as poorly as they are paid. In 2010, in the state of Florida, we had 8,000 graduates from Florida's colleges and universities of new teachers and about 1,000 vacancies. This summer, we had over 10,000 teacher vacancies and only about 2,000 or 3,000 graduates from Florida's colleges and universities of people going into the teaching profession. So clearly, we see that over the last 12 years, there's been this shift. Why? Because of bad policy, because of the constant teacher bashing. I was asked the other day, what are the solutions? So, well, there's no silver bullet for sure, because this has been building over years now. But what we know is the first thing we can do right now is the governor and others can stop bashing teachers, right? Lift teachers up, support them instead of bashing them. Two, we can talk to those who've left the profession and see if we can get them to come back in. The governor talks about waiving fees for military vets. How about waiving fees for all teachers? It's very expensive for someone coming out of college to have to pay hundreds of dollars and sometimes almost $1,000 to get fingerprinted, to get certified, to take all these certification exams. Waive all those fees and make it easier for people to get into the profession. And let's look for everyone. And let's look at long-term solutions, such as changing the bad policy we've been under here in Florida for the last 12 years.
So you raise a good point. So this proposed plan by the governor would waive some of those fees you just identified, those hundreds of dollars, if you are a veteran, but those fees aren't waived if you're one of these college students graduating from one of these Florida teaching colleges and you're wanting to go into the teaching profession?
No, it's not waived, and you have to take at least 3 state tests. Those all come with a price tag of a couple of $100. You then have to apply for your teaching certificate, another few $100 there. You have to obviously go through background checks, which we want, and you have to pay a few $100 there. So by the time you're done with it, it's actually more expensive to get a teaching certificate than it is to take the bar in the state of Florida. So
you have to bring up lawyers, Andrew.
I know, I had to, just for you.
That's a good one, though. So, Andrew, you talk to a lot of teachers. You represent them. What is the main reasons they are saying they are leaving the profession? Those 10 that you said just, quit that one district, they weren't qualified, you said. So they probably needed to go. But what about some of these great teachers that we know are out there? Why are we losing them?
Yeah, so the American Federation of Teachers, one of our national unions, recently did a poll of members across the country. This was a countrywide poll, and they found that in the greatest professions in the world, right, the people who work in our public schools, 80%, nearly 80% are dissatisfied with teaching, 46% extremely dissatisfied with the job right now. And when they were asked why, number one, the horrible pay, the low pay, the unfair pay. Number
What
two,
do teachers make? We hear how poorly teachers are paid, but give us some sense of like what the national average salary is for a teacher.
I don't have the national figures in front of me. I can tell you Florida, it's about the average teacher pay in the state of Florida is just under $52,000 a year. And so Florida actually has implemented some very archaic rules that have actually compressed salaries, kept salaries extremely low. And we call it in Florida, actually, the teacher experience penalty. In 2010, average teacher pay in Florida was 36th in the nation. Today, it's 48th in the nation. In 2010, there was one law around setting teacher pay, and it was our right to collectively bargain. Today, there are over 20 laws in place here in Florida. And I literally just talked to a teacher not that long ago with 25 years of experience. She's making $52,000 right now. And I got to tell you, that teacher found a salary schedule from her district from 2008, 2009, just when the recession was starting. A teacher with 25 years experience back then was making $59,000, $7,000 more than she is today. That's the teacher experience penalty in Florida.
Wow. $52,000 for a teacher with 25 years experience?
Yes.
That's amazing. I mean, that's
It's what is driving our experienced teachers out of the profession. That and the lack of respect. Teaching creates all other professions, right? Without our teachers, we all think about it. I can think of many teachers in my career. I can think of Dr. Goodwin and Mrs. Siapa, Mrs. Beck, all these other teachers that I had in my career who motivated me, who excited me about learning, who connected me to learning, and who really made me who I am today by so many things they did, even beyond the learning aspect. Like my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Siapa, pushed me outside of my comfort zone. I was a very shy kid. And look where I am today. Had she not pushed me out of that comfort zone and said, look, being a shy kid doesn't mean you can't do things. And she continued to encourage me and push me. And that's what we need out of our teachers, right? People who connect with kids, who understand kids, who get to know them and their families. There's that sacred bond that exists between teachers and students, teachers and families. And what we're dealing with here in Florida, you mentioned all those crazy laws. They're geared at trying to create a divide, to break that bond, to prevent those relationships from developing. But if we think back to our own childhood, anyone can talk about teachers that influence them.
I'm just doing the math. I'm just still stuck. I'm sorry, Andrew, on this $52,000. That's less than it's not even $5,000 a month. Because that would be $60,000. What is an apartment? I mean, so if you're making $4,200, $4,500 a month as a teacher, what are you paying rent in Florida?
Yeah, rent has been an issue. Florida is becoming a very unaffordable place to live under this governor, and rent has been shooting up. So you look in Orlando right now, we got people paying $2,500, $3,000 a month for rent. And we have people who, teachers and people who work in our schools and other citizens, quite honestly, who all of a sudden get notices that their rent's going up at the end of their lease by in some cases 20, 30% or more. Some people are seeing increases of $400, $500, $600 a month without really any time to prepare for it. And their wages certainly aren't going up in that rate.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a place like Orlando, you got to pay $3,000. You're only making $4,500. You're barely able to pay your rent and have enough left over for a car note, health insurance, or other kinds of insurance, car insurance, and groceries. You mentioned too, Andrew, that one of the reasons these teachers are leaving is because of the attacks, the way that teachers are maligned, oftentimes by the folks who are elected to represent them. What does it do to a teacher's psyche to be called a groomer? We know that language or that word is used often, particularly when you're talking about, teachers who may talk about families that have two moms or two dads. Somehow they get accused of grooming kids to become, to identify, have some kind of sexual identity that they don't agree with. How does that impact a teacher's, psyche to hear that word?
When you think about the people who come work in our schools, these are people who care about kids overwhelmingly, right? And these are people who sacrifice so much. They literally take money out of their own pocket to buy things for their students, sometimes shoes or socks or clothes, sometimes books. And so, what's happened here in Florida, literally, we have one school district, Sarasota County, Florida, where they're not doing book fairs right now, those scholastic book fairs. Think back again to when we were kids. I was a kid who struggled with reading. I have dyslexia. I struggled all the time. I wasn't an avid reader, didn't like to read. But when I went to the book fair, I could pick out a book of my own. I was excited about that. It was an exciting opportunity to be told we can't do those right now because of these new laws, or teachers in their classrooms. Go into any elementary school classroom, right? You go into an elementary classroom, you see books everywhere. Most of those books are bought and paid for by the teacher. And so teachers have these books. Why do they have so many books? Because they want kids to see themselves in their books. I'm a white Jewish guy. I'm married to an African-American Christian, and my wife and I have two girls. So they're children who have multi-religious backgrounds. They're kids who are biracial. Them being able to see themselves in their books is important for children of color, for children of different ethnicities, for people who've come from different parts of the world and come to the United States of America, for people who have two moms or two dads. Being able to see books about them is so important. And it's why teachers have hundreds, if not over 1,000 books in their classroom library. Teachers in Florida, in some places, were told at the beginning of this year that they needed to go through every book and take out any books that the new law might find controversial, or take all their books home if they didn't want to spend the time doing that.
And what is this law specifically that you're making reference to, Andrew?
So this is what's called House Bill 1467 in Florida, and it's a book that allows anyone, not even just parents, anybody from the general public to come in, demand to see all the books that you have in a school and say, I want those books banned. And anyone with no connection to the school system can say you should ban these books. And so school districts are concerned, and they're trying to get ahead of it. And
there are lists of which books have to be banned. So is that what the directive was? Teachers go through all of your books and see if they, if you check the boxes because it talks about gay families or it talks about slavery. So is that what teachers had to do?
Yeah, teachers are being told to go through and to make sure that none of their books are controversial topics that might lead to someone challenging the book in the district, because districts are worried about being sued. Now, some districts have done nothing. They're waiting because there's no rules from the state yet on any of this stuff. But some districts are concerned and they're getting ahead of it. They're worried about
a book that would fall under this controversial subject category.
I don't know, but here's the thing I will tell you right now in Florida. As a parent, I know this very well. Parents in Florida know this. In Florida, if there's a book you don't want your child to read, let's say it is To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Or The Color Purple, who knows, whatever book, you have an objection to it for some reason, and you don't want your child reading that book. In Florida right now, and this has been law for a long time, you can say, I don't want my child reading that book. Can you give them an alternative assignment? And every teacher, every school district in this state will give an alternative assignment. The issue here is you've got people being able to say, I don't want your kids reading those books. And that's where I think the line gets drawn, because that's not about parental rights. Remember, as parents, and I know the superintendent can talk about this when she comes on, but in districts, we have parents at all levels of the spectrum, if you will, right? We have parents who are single parents working 2 and 3 jobs. They leave home before their kid wakes up in the morning. They get home after their kids come to bed at night, but they're doing the best they can with what they have. And then we've got parents who, are fortunate enough to be able to work from home, or they're able to be a stay-at-home parent, and they can come to school at any time, and they can be with their kid, and they can do all that stuff. We as educators have to recognize every parent, because every parent's voice should matter. Every parent wants the best for their kid. And so this idea that some parents can have rights that other parents don't have, that doesn't make sense.
Andrew. A lot of this is parent bullying. It's that, those parents that have, a lot of them have a lot of time on their hand. A lot of them have gotten attached to some of these very extremist nonprofit organizations, political organizations that have an agenda. And oftentimes they are the loudest, even though they may not be the majority. And I do want to bring in Superintendent Tahara Dupree Chase. Dr. Chase is the superintendent of Westbury Union Free School District in New York. Good morning, Dr. Chase. We know this school shortage that Andrew has talked about, that's, in the press, 280,000 teachers, missing for all practical purposes, isn't just happening in Florida. What's the state of teachers, or is there a teacher shortage, I guess I should ask, that's impacting districts where you are?
So first of all, thank you so much for just opening up this forum to have such an important discussion about education. Typically now when we hear about education on the news, it's something negative. So I'm glad that you're talking about solutions-oriented dialogue, and that's really important. There's a teacher shortage everywhere in the country. We don't have the same conditions that I've heard my colleagues speak of in Florida, here in New York, but we do have a teacher shortage nonetheless. I think that New York has been a bit more progressive in their thinking, in that we have made some intentional efforts in terms of providing more funding to schools so that schools can attract candidates, viable candidates, and we don't have to go an alternative route such as Florida did. I think that the state of New York has also done a really great job in looking at educational programs and improving upon them and providing some sort of grant, especially in areas of need. Here in New York, we're not a utopia. So I hope I'm not implying that at all. But there is a teacher shortage all over the country. And a lot has to do with the last 2 years, education being politicized. It has become everyone's pawn on the chess table, and it's completely unfair to our educators. It's unfair to our families. More importantly, it's unfair to our students.
Let's say, I want to ask you a couple questions, Dr. Chase. One, you heard that $52,000. That is just like seared in my brain. What's the average pay for a teacher in New York?
So in New York, it varies depending if you're downstate or upstate, but typically we range anywhere between $65,000 to $80,000. Now, keep in mind the cost of living might be a little bit different than it is in Florida. We still have teachers who struggle. We still have teachers who may have to take on 2 jobs, teachers who rely on a second income in their family. But many districts, mine included, have been working really hard to bring the teacher pay up. We've just settled a contract with our teachers union. We increased their pay, and we made all attempts to mimic the cost of living increase in our increase of pay.
So, Dr. Chase, you heard what Andrew said, that national study showed 80% of teachers not happy with the profession, 46% really unhappy with the profession. When you talk to teachers that have left the profession, what's the number one thing you're hearing as to why they are leaving?
Well, it's the conditions in which many of them are forced to teach in. I've heard teachers speak, and not my district, let me be clear, but I've heard teachers speak very ill of the profession, the administrators, the revolving door, the instability in some school districts. You know, and I know that in New York, there's been a divide in terms of should children be masked or not, vaccination. So there were so many political issues that have come up over the last 2 years that have completely turned folk off from education. Oftentimes, there were teachers in many districts that were forced to do things other than teaching every day. They have become so many other professions, and complete disrespect and disregard for teaching has to be the number one reason.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. And again, I want to go back to you, Andrew, in terms of this plan by DeSantis to put these veterans in classrooms. Again, when he's making this announcement, he somehow makes this link between kids reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and how great it'll be if you're reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and you look over there and you see a veteran that fought for this country, and what a great thing that is. It seems like, you're injecting your views about the military, about what patriotism is into the classroom. How dangerous is that?
I don't know how dangerous it is, except that, when I think about people having success in the teaching profession, they've got to be able to connect to kids. It takes a special kind of person to become a teacher. Not everyone is geared up to be a teacher. Just because you were in the military doesn't mean you'll be a great teacher. Just because you're a CEO doesn't mean you'll be a great teacher. We've heard all kinds of schemes, if you will, over the course of time to get people into the teaching profession. There are programs out there right now. Troops to Teachers, for example, is a federal program that encourages those in the military and helps them go through the process, get all of the full credentials to become teachers. Those are great programs. Let's lift up those programs. But again, I'm going to say, no matter what your experience is, and the superintendent just said it, if you are in a situation where you go into a school district or a classroom and you're not properly supported and you don't have the right resources and you don't have everything you need to do your job effectively, you're probably not going to stay. And that's the underlying issue we continue to see day in and day out.
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Chase, playing devil's advocate for a minute. We need 280,000 teachers. We know how difficult that is going to be. And as we're trying to add teachers, we're going to continue to lose teachers because these culture wars that we're talking about continue. And as we get closer to the midterm elections, they're only going to intensify, particularly in states where there are these battles going on between Democrats and Republicans over Senate seats and congressional seats and gerrymandering and all these things that are happening. What is the harm of bringing in someone who doesn't have a college degree, but maybe they've worked in some other profession where they have some good lived experiences and some good work experiences? What's the problem with putting them in? So they have good people skills. They have kids at home and they've been around kids. Why can't they teach second, third graders? It's math, it's adding and subtraction. You don't necessarily need to go to college to know how to add and subtract.
Well, that sounds great. And I absolutely respect the fact that there are people who can bring life experiences into classrooms. They've had other experience in other professions and other industries. And to bring that into the classroom, to bridge that, has its place. But teachers are skilled. They have a particular training that you just can't pull someone who's in another industry and say, go into a classroom and impact students. You see, you can have a classroom of, maybe 18 students, 21 students, 25, 30 students. You have 30 different learning styles. And it takes someone who is trained, who is skilled in the profession to understand how to impact learning when you have those different learning styles, different learning modalities. You may have someone who's on the autism spectrum. And if you're not trained in how to impact that child, how to pull out of that child, I don't care what other industry skills you may have, you're not going to impact that child at all. You may have a child who's dyslexic. You may have a child who is, an auditory learner, a child who is a tactile learner. You have to know how to impact that child based on how he or she learns. There's a quote by Sitting Bull that I always love to share with my staff. And if you can't teach the way students learn, perhaps we should teach. If students can't learn the way we teach, then we should teach the way students learn. That is something that you cannot pull from a different industry. That is something that teachers have spent years upon years, have spent a lot of money and being skilled at. And
I'm not suggesting, and I don't do anything to undermine the expertise and the skills of teachers. And I'm sitting here thinking about lawyers, and we have these fights about how come paralegals can't do some of the things that lawyers do. And, we stand up and shake our heads and say, no, no, no. We have special training. We have special skills as lawyers that are different from paralegals. They can do some things, but they can't do all the things. So I know, there's some of this is protecting our professions. But Andrew, if you need 280,000 people, you can't find them overnight. And I know it's not perfect, but are we letting the pursuit for the perfect, disrupt or interrupt our ability to do good? So it's not going to be the perfect person that Dr. Chase just described that can identify the autistic kid, the dyslexic kid, the kid who has oppositional defiance. You're going to have all of that in the classroom. But somebody standing there, the classroom doesn't go empty. You don't have to put those 18 kids with 3 other classes of 18. So now you got like 60 kids in the classroom, and they are teaching something as we try to get to those skilled people.
Yeah. So look, here's the bottom line in my mind, right? One, as a parent, I want my daughter in a classroom with a highly trained, fully credentialed, well-supported teacher, right? My youngest daughter's in 8th grade. My oldest daughter's now at Howard.
Right, but Andrew, I got to stop you. We all want that, but we can't have it right now. 280,000 teachers are missing. We don't have them. So should we do something in the short term to address this problem while we work on getting higher salaries, telling these idiots to stop maligning teachers? I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. It's going to take time.
Yeah, but what we should be doing actually is, first and foremost, we should stop the mass exodus, right? And if we stop the mass exodus, then we can start bringing back people who left. Again, there are a lot of qualified teachers out there who just aren't teaching in the classroom anymore. They walked away. And if we don't fix the underlying issue, even if you bring in unqualified individuals, they're not going to stay. So we're going to keep having this revolving door. That will not solve the problem, just saying lower the standards, let anyone come in, because the problem is bigger than that, right? And so we have to fix the problem. Short term, we've got to address the issue of constantly bashing teachers. Short term, we can actually ramp up and bring people back into the profession. But a lot of the challenges are going to have to be fixed over the course of time. And we can start doing some of those things immediately. Lawmakers can go back into session around this country, state by state, and put more money into schools to raise teacher pay. They can do that if they want to do it, and there's a will to do it, right?
Stop right there, because I want to ask Dr. Chase this. How is it that teachers' pay has remained so incredibly low? The $52,000 just blows my mind. 80,000 starts to sound close to right. What are we missing in this country? Why is it that we devalue the profession so much that we pay? I can think of so many other professions, have people that work in my office who do administrative work who make more than $52,000 a year. Some of them have no college experience. So how is it that we got to a place where teachers who have got to do at least 4 years, many do master's degrees on top of their bachelor's degrees, why are we stuck at such low pay for teachers?
We've been cutting funding from schools. There's never been a true investment in public education in this country. People talk the talk, but they don't walk the talk. And you hear over and over and over, lack of funding, cut funding. And we've been hearing for so many years, cut the funding, cut education, cut out after school programs, cut out this program, cut out that program. But as you're cutting programs, you're also keeping teacher pay at a level that is continuing to be low. We have not invested in education. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in college programs that are going to better prepare our teachers. We need to invest in retaining teachers by making sure that professional development is a priority, that teachers are also supported and that they're guided. There's mentorship, right? And they're still learning. They're constantly learning. We need to make attracting young people to the profession more attractive by lowering the cost of college education for those who want to study education. Areva, I'll be honest with you. I was at my alumni, Norfolk State University's graduation maybe 3 years ago, and I was stunned to see the number of graduates in the School of Education. When I graduated in 1994, that was the largest graduating group. I was there 3 years ago. There were 13 students who raised up to be acknowledged for graduating from the School of Education. Wow. It's dwindling. And the fact that we constantly hear teacher bashing, education bashing, and we're also hearing how it's being politicized with political pawns, we're not making it attractive, but we're not investing in public education. You see, as the union leader spoke earlier, education is responsible for every other profession. Why not uphold us? We're probably one of the few countries in this world where teachers are disrespected and education is not held in the highest regard. We have got to do better if we're going to see change.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Last question for you, Andrew, and we'll let you guys go. What should a teacher make?
What should a teacher make? Look, I think we've got to get to a place where we do have teachers topping out over $100,000 a year in pay. And that should be the average, right? Like it shouldn't, we've got to have a system that rewards people for their experience. Experience matters in everything we do. No one goes out and looks for the least experienced person to fix their car or to represent them in a lawsuit or to teach their kids, right? And so we've got to value experience. We've got to value the people who work in our schools, and we got to recognize that the founding fathers of this country, although it's changed over time, believed that we needed to have an educated citizenry to make our country succeed and to make sure we were here forever. And that's the part that's under attack right now, is this idea of ensuring the democracy by going after teachers. I'll end with this. When Hitler was rising in Germany, the first thing he went after was the public schools. We need to counter that. We need to learn from our history. We need to lift up our public schools and support them. And 90% of parents across this nation believe in strong public schools, regardless of their political party. This is not a political issue. This is an issue of right versus wrong.
Yeah, I didn't tell you what I was thinking, Andrew, about that, but I was absolutely positively thinking teachers need to make six figures. I cannot imagine why nurses and other professionals make, $90 to $120,000, $150,000. How come teachers don't make that kind of money in this country? It's absolutely unacceptable. Thank you so much, Andrew. We're going to keep our eye on what happens in Florida with those veterans. Doesn't sound like a great idea, but we'll see. And we're, hold up hope that, I don't know, you go back and find some of those teachers you said that have left the profession that maybe will come back. And Dr. Chase, glad to see you doing well, and good luck to you on your first day of school.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate both of you for taking time out on your busy days.
Absolutely. Be well.
Thank you.
All right, my next guest is Rex Hupke, and Rex is a columnist for the USA Today newspaper, and he wrote this opinion column last week that caught my attention because it was how this nation and some of these really bad people, I don't know, maybe they're not bad people, but good people that say bad things, how they can apologize to teachers and address this major teacher shortage that we've been talking about all morning. Good morning, Rex, and thanks for joining me.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
Okay, Rex, you heard Dr. Chase and Andrew from Florida. It's bad out there for teachers. These folks are leaving jobs left and right, and we can see why. I'm going to keep talking about this $52,000 because it's just blowing my mind. And obviously, you were inspired by how teachers are being treated in this country to write this op-ed. So tell us, what was your inspiration?
Well, I've been watching for a while now, and obviously, you talk about what teachers are paid. We've known that for a long time. They're poorly underpaid, and given the important role that they play, I mean, good luck finding someone who won't say that teachers are fundamentally important to our children's lives, to our lives, to our society. And so over the past, I'm not even sure how many months it's been, it's probably been pushing a year now of people going after teachers. And we saw all of these viral videos of school board meetings where people are getting up and getting mad about critical race theory is being taught. And, you're especially the groomer stuff. And you mentioned the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida that has just unleashed this torrent of anger and I mean, sometimes outright threats. I mean, this is it's one of those things that I think we deal with so much right now where we have it's a small part of the population, but they're noisy and they can be scary. It can be really scary. So I kind of look at it like when I started hearing about teacher shortages, I was like, oh yeah, what'd you expect?
Yeah, if you throw paint at someone every day, for 2 years straight, and then you say, hey, well, keep coming back to work so we have more paint to throw at you. I don't know, Rex, what about you? But for me, that term groomer, when they started calling teachers groomers, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Was that the same thing that really triggered you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's offensive on so many different levels. Right. I mean, first of all, you're associating they come at it through issues relating to LGBTQ books in school or teachers discussing issues of gender, what have you. And so they're making a completely false and abhorrent link between LGBTQ people and pedophiles is what they're talking about. That's what when they say groomers, that's what they mean. And that's horrendous. And that is dangerous. So it's dangerous, not just, of course, to the teachers who are being labeled this, but it's dangerous to the broader LGBTQ community because it's making that just absolutely false and really, I think, twisted link. So there's that. And then, of course, the teachers themselves. And nobody, that's a horrible thing to say to anybody, it's
right. I mean, the whole concept of a groomer is like someone's grooming someone to engage in some kind of illicit sexual activity, and they are making being a part of the LGBT community synonymous with being a criminal that's engaged in this kind of illicit behavior. Talk to us about what these people We know who they are. And if you're listening and watching, you know if you are one of them, what do they need to say sorry for?
A lot, frankly. I mean, it's been just, you wouldn't.
No, it's the the
Yeah.
grouper comment. Definitely say sorry for that. But you can go through kind of a list of things.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole critical race theory thing, which a Republican operative very directly said, this was all a ploy to, cause trouble, basically. I mean, the critical race theory,
the country to create a culture war. Yes, he's very clear, very open about his intention, and it worked.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and it worked perfectly. And again, critical race theory, anybody who takes the time to actually do 5 minutes of looking at reputable sources knows is not something that we teach in grade school. It's a legal framework, and so this whole thing is just ginned up. It's just nonsense. Are we teaching kids to be thoughtful, to understand other people, to understand other points of views, and to look at our history and see the good and the bad? Yeah. And I think that's what we would all want for our kids, to make them, understand the world broadly, because whether anybody who wants to shout and holler about critical race theory or whatever, whether they like it or not, your kids are growing up in a diverse world. And I don't mean just country, world. We're connected globally now. So anything you do to narrow their focus because there's something you don't want to hear about or you don't want them to hear about.
We keep hearing this. It makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
This
yes.
notion that somehow because something makes you uncomfortable, you shouldn't have to deal with it. You shouldn't learn about things. If there's certain things that should make you uncomfortable. I mean, you should be uncomfortable about slavery. You should be uncomfortable about the brutality of slavery. If you're not, there's probably something wrong with you if that doesn't make you uncomfortable. But that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the scary thing. You also say, Rex, they should say sorry about all the threats.
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, that's what, well, I guess it's hard to rank what's worst necessarily when you're talking about a lot of really bad things. But there have been threats and direct harassment of threats against teachers and direct harassment of teachers. And I mean, come on, first of all, I would encourage anyone to go spend a day in a elementary or high school classroom and tell me how easy that is, first of all. And then on top of that,
Rex, we kind of did that with the pandemic. We heard.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my God, this is hard work being a home teacher.
And that's just like a couple kids, maybe, depending. So yeah, this is, on top of all that, you are now adding fear. You're giving teachers a visceral sense of discomfort and, feeling like they actually have to worry about themselves or maybe their children or their families. And that's just, it's horrible. And again, it does come that we live in a world where things are so easily amplified, right? So I do not for a minute believe that anywhere near a majority or even a sizable minority of people in this country are like this, are accusing teachers of such things. It's a small piece, but it's loud and it's problematic and it needs to be quashed. The rest of us have to agree, okay, this is fundamentally wrong. This is messed up. These are teachers. These are people who are, there to help our kids. Parents should have voices, of course, all that sort of thing, but it's being, spun into this just absolutely conspiratorial, weird space. And we need to say, no, you can't do that to our teachers.
So here was one that really caught my attention too, Rex, as a lawyer. You said we need to say sorry about the lawsuits and using the tip line. Why did you bring that up? Why is that something that these people, we're just calling people in air quotes, why do they need to say sorry about the lawsuits?
Well, yeah, because again, this is all, and look, I won't get too deep into talking about elements of fascism and whatnot, but if you look at what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida, I mean, they are creating an environment that is intended to squash speech when it comes to educators and not just even in grade schools and elementary schools all the way up through college by setting things up so that if you talk about a certain thing, a parent can file a lawsuit against the school district I mean, that's becomes
scary. That would be a reason to leave the profession.
Of course.
Now can be targeted. And we heard Andrew Sparks that some of these laws give permission to anyone
Yep.
to walk into a classroom, see a book they don't like or think is controversial, and say the teacher didn't pull it from the shelf, and maybe file a lawsuit against that teacher. So the teachers are just sitting ducks in some ways.
Yeah.
Really scary stuff. So, Andrew, you use satire. I'm sorry, I called you Andrew. Rex.
Oh, no, that's fine. I answered everything.
I'm stuck on Andrew for $52,000. But Rex, you use satire in this article. Some parts are funny, but obviously very serious stuff that you're talking about. What is it that you want people to take away from this other than to cut out the behavior? But for those of us that haven't been engaged in this behavior, what do you want us to take away from the article?
Well, I think we're all busy and not everybody's dialed in all the time. So some people hear about things like this happening. They hear little dribs and drabs. And I think by satirizing it a bit, by kind of taking it to its logical extreme, it's a way to hopefully get people to say, oh, wow, yeah, that's messed up. Okay, this is kind of funny, but holy cow, this is actually sort of happening, this is, and so, I think we live in a time when things are just so bonkers, I mean, you look at what's happening with Trump and has been happening for however many, 6, 8, 7 years, where it feels like truth is turned on its head and we don't always know what is going on. Sometimes I think by satirizing it, by lampooning it a bit, it gets people to kind of come back to center a little bit and say, oh, wow, yeah, this is really messed up. And that's what I want people to say.
File a lawsuit against your teacher.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Good idea. Reactions. What's the reaction been to the piece?
Pretty interesting, actually. I heard very quickly, both through email and on social media, from a lot of people who either are teachers or know teachers, especially in Florida. That seemed to be the number one spot that I was getting reaction from. And again, that's where the satire kind of vanishes and it becomes real, because I had people emailing saying, yeah, I'm not teaching this part of things this year because I'm afraid. I don't know if I can do this or not. Someone talked about they actually sent me an image of a unicorn with a little rainbow behind it. And, it's just like a little kid fun image. This was an elementary school teacher, and she didn't put it up this year. She usually hangs it with the decorations in her classroom, and she didn't put it up this year because there's a rainbow in it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's not like
the rainbow. What is associated with
LGBT? It's like the rainbow flag or something. So she's like, and again, it had nothing to do to unicorn. It's, what I'm talking about. It's like one of those little sparkly images and fun things. And, they're like, I don't know. Is this okay? Maybe not. I don't want to get sued. So, it's just really messed up. And I feel deeply for these teachers, because I have always just valued educators so much. I mean, I see, I look back on high school and the people that really inspired me, as a writer and all that sort of thing. I look at my kids and the teachers that they have, and just what an impact that they can have and how important it is. So
about a profession that used to be so revered, right? Up there with firefighters and nurses, the people that you entrusted your child to, who your child spent most of their time with outside of their parents. And I'm thinking of all the gifts I took to my kids' teachers, and all the ways you would try to volunteer in the classroom to support the teacher. Now to think that this poor teacher you just described is afraid to put up a symbol. And I also had a AP English teacher on the show a couple of weeks ago, who, because of the banning of books in the classroom, he's in Florida, he started a GoFundMe account to purchase books and then put those books in public places around his town, like at the local coffee shop, at the local drugstore, the local ice cream store, and then tell the kids kind of quietly, hey, if you want to read that book, you can pick it up at the ice cream shop, because I can't give it to you. I can't assign it. I can't even have it on the premises, even though I'm teaching AP English, where you're supposed to read, the most, advanced literature. So it's a little scary. I'll tell you something else that has me worried, Rex. I don't know, you probably saw this headline that AP, African American Studies, is going to be introduced into schools for the first time ever. And I'm thinking, how are we going to do that? When
Yeah.
schools are preventing teachers from teaching about race. There was a bill that we talked about on the show not too long ago where some state legislator wanted to change the word slave and the concept of slavery and talk about it in the context of immigration. I kid you not making it up. That's true.
Oof.
So how are we going to introduce AP African American Studies into the curriculum of high schools? And I was clapping and cheering that finally should have been there with AP English and AP Calculus a long time ago. But how do we even get there if we can't teach Black history? We can't teach about slavery.
Yeah, I have no idea. And this is what, we shouldn't be throwing up roadblocks for education right now. I mean, our students nationally are struggling. We're falling behind other countries. And so we should be doing everything possible to encourage education and to, but like, you're exactly right. I can't even imagine how prickly that would be trying to put in a class, which is an important class. You're right. That's something we should have been teaching for ages and we weren't. And now we have a chance to do something about it. Because again, a bunch of noisy people are like, oh no, we can't say, don't make my kid feel bad or, whatever. It's like, come on. I mean, it's so, honestly, to me, it's so pathetic. I think like this reactionary nonsense is, and the fact that it is going to hurt students. Obviously it's already hurting teachers. It's probably already hurting students also for that matter, but it's just ridiculous. I mean, and again, we need to understand each other. We need to learn about everything and soak it in and make decisions about, how we feel about it. And this stops that.
Well, you and I both as parents, I heard you said you have kids, Rex. We know that if your kid can't hear the word slavery, boy, I don't know how they're going to survive once they get out in the real world. Because if that's the toughest thing that they're prepared to handle, boy, when they get out in the world and get on a job and deal with all the corporate dynamics that happen in the workplace and marriage and relationships, boy, it's going to be a tough going for those kids. I want to ask you before I let you go, Rex, what are you working on? What's next?
Well, I'm paying attention to President Biden's speech tonight, actually, about he's going back to this soul of America idea. And I think it actually ties in a bit with what we're talking about, because he's talking about the power that Trump still holds over so many people and the direction that that's kind of taking us. And I do think there's a fundamental question here. And I think that it's a question that is not, I'm a pretty liberal columnist, but I think this is a question that a lot of people on the more conservative side need to be, and probably are, asking themselves, which is, you may not like going all the way left, but are you sure you want to go this way? Because this way looks really bad. And, this way leads to, teachers being shut down and getting sued and, zany conspiracies filtering their way into our educational system and that sort of thing. So I'm going to be watching his speech tonight with a good amount of interest. I feel like I'm cautious. I'm cautious to be optimistic these days. I've been burned too many times, but I feel like we have seen over the past maybe 6 months or so a shift away from some of this as people are starting to process what's happening. I think
what I'm sensing, Rex, is the right went too far.
Yes.
One thing about this country is, you can stretch us, a lot, but when you go too far, there tends to be, a counter response. And I think you're right. We're seeing it in some of the elections like Kansas. We saw it last night with the Sarah Palin election. And I think people are just saying enough is enough. Like, some of this stuff is taking us, Lindsey Graham threatening riots in the streets because someone gets indicted that's committed a crime. Defund the FBI, all of the insanity and the torture on anyone that said defund the police, and now to have Republicans in Congress saying defund. First of all, they shouldn't even speak the word. Like, keep the word out your mouth. Remember, that's such a bad word.
Yeah. Right.
Now you are using the defund word with the FBI. And you and I don't know how old you are, but we can remember when conservatives, Republicans were the law and order party,
Sure.
supported law enforcement. Now, January 6th, trample them, beat them with clubs and sticks, disregard them, all the way over to defund them. Just get rid of law enforcement altogether.
We're in the upside down here. It just makes no sense. And it's just every day practically, I just am like, wait, what? Now, how did, and it's also, they're the cancel culture folks too. And now they're,
You want to cancel the FBI?
Right, yeah. I'm like, well, come on, man, pick a lane here. Like,
they want to cancel the FBI. They want to get rid of the Department of Justice, except when the Department of Justice was going to go after Hillary Clinton. Of course, then we love the Department of Justice. So I could talk to you forever.
Yes.
Thank you for the work that you do. I'm going to be looking for that column on the speech now. I'll be watching the speech as well. Biden seems to be on fire. He seems to be a little energized. He got a little pep in his step. Got those theater glasses on, and he's got a couple of wins under the belt. That's couple of percentage points in his ratings. So I'm feeling pretty good about where we are. Sometimes you just got to stand in your ground and fight back, and that's what I think folks around the country have decided to do. So thanks again for joining me this morning, Rex. I'll be looking for that column.
Thank you. And thanks so much for talking about this issue. It's so important. And the folks you had on in the first segment there were amazing. And I just, it's great to hear this talked about. And the more we do it, the better.
Fantastic. Thank you again, my friend. I want to thank all of my guests for joining me this morning. It is back to school. For many schools, literally, Dr. Chase, that was her first day of school. Andrew said Florida schools had started a couple of weeks earlier, but millions and millions of kids around this country are going back to school or have started school, and they are going into classrooms where these culture wars are continuing, and they are disruptive. They're causing teachers to leave classrooms. They're causing administrators to leave school districts, and that could never be good. We cannot replace 280,000 teachers on a dime. So that means classrooms, perhaps that were 18 and 20, maybe 40, 50, 60 kids. So I just hope that these loud voices that think it's okay to malign and to harass and to try to intimidate teachers and these legislators that keep passing these regressive laws understand that their kids too are going to be in some of those classes with 50, 60 kids. It's not as if the MAGA people get to have their own bubble and live in a world that's different than the rest of us. Their kids are impacted by the teacher shortage that we've been talking about. Their kids are impacted by these culture wars. And hopefully, as Dr. Chase said, and these are my words to live by today, people will stop talking the talk and start walking the talk. And if you believe in education, if you believe in creating the next generation of leaders, let teachers do their jobs. We love you, veterans. We love you. But if you're not educated, if you're not a certified teacher, you don't need to be in the classroom. Let's find those veterans some jobs someplace else, doing something that they are trained and skilled to do. And that's not teaching the next generation of leaders. Be safe out there. And remember, we're all in this together.